Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking about episode 14 of season 1 of Arrow called Odyssey. The first thing we got to talk about is that it's very fitting that I'm calling this the first season of Arrow because just the other day it was announced the series has indeed been renewed. We are going to be getting a second season of Arrow. If you follow me on Twitter, you noticed that I was really jazzed about that. So this is really the show that I've really been the most enjoying reviewing the most so far this year. So I could not be more thrilled about that. So anyway, there's a lot going on in this episode. So let's just get right into it. Let's talk about what's going on in the present first, and get that out of the way, and then we'll go and talk about what happened on the island. All right. Of course, the main big thing that happens is that Felicity finds out that Oliver is the vigilante. Now, I like that she basically says that she'd pretty much figured it out already. I mean, a lot of this is something fans have been talking a lot about, and the general consensus from what I see is if Felicity hasn't figured it out already, she's an idiot. And I like how she even lampshades it by saying, I'm blonde, but I'm not that blonde. So, really, I have to give the show the credit for treating Felicity as an intelligent character. And the one thing, though, is that was really kind of getting to me about what was going on there is at the very beginning of the episode, how did Felicity get into the Arrow Cave? Remember, we've seen that you have to know where the little hidden switch in the fuse box is to get into there from the nightclub. So how did she do that? Now, the most simplest explanation is that Oliver, came to for a moment and explained to her how to get in there so that she could get Dig's help. Otherwise, she would have just been stuck outside the factory while Oliver bled to death. Presuming that Dig doesn't have, there's not a surveillance or security system that would have alerted Dig to somebody coming into the factory, which you would really think there would have been. But that didn't happen, so there doesn't seem to be. Wow, what terrible security. Oh boy. Anyway, now after all of that, we basically get to see the rest of the episode in the present is spent mostly with Felicity and Dig kind of having a talk about the whole situation, and we get to see them bounce off each other a little bit, and kind of come to understand not only a little bit about Felicity. We'll also get some very interesting story from Dig about killing a guy when he was in Afghanistan. And he does raise a very, very interesting question is, can you do stuff like that and still consider yourself one of the good guys? And, there is no simple explanation to that. The world, especially anything involving politics, has lots of shades of gray. As it's been said, one person's terrorist is another one's freedom fighter. One person's hero is another person's villain. And in life, I think it's fair to say that while most people do try to be good people, I think it's only reasonable to say that if we're really honest with ourselves, sometimes we're the hero and sometimes we're the villain. It's just whether or not we're the hero or the villain in our own story, or the hero or the villain in someone else's story. That's the real difference. Anyway, on that rather mildly depressing thought, let's move on. Now, I've kind of complained about how Felicity, who is essentially just an IT technician, albeit a very talented one, has been going around doing stuff like running full spectrum analyses on crazy designer drugs, and how that just really doesn't make any sense. Well, here we get to see a little bit more of that. Now, some of this is explained. She said, I've been working on computers when I was 7. Now, granted, this doesn't really qualify you to be able to fix hospital equipment, but on the other hand, she was able to look at it up and oh, this needs to be, jiggered this way. I think there's a wire loose or something. Okay, I think a basic familiarity with technology, I think we can let that one slide. The stuff about upgrading his system. Now, some people I've seen online were kind of confused by this because, well, it's not like Felicity could have gone down to the hardware store or something, but again, we have to keep in mind she's an IT technician. So I don't think she meant she made Oliver a better computer like out of junk that was just laying around the warehouse. I think it's more like she upgraded his operating system and sorted it all out and really made it flow and work much better, which is exactly the sort of thing that IT technicians do. And there are always a million ways you can do and refine and tweak your computer to make it run better. If you were like me, I go to the site Lifehacker every single day and find all kinds of really cool tips there. So again, it does make sense, and it is also another way of establishing that Felicity has skills and abilities that she can bring to the table, which is of course is part of the reason why they do ultimately end up asking her if she wants to join the team full time. And I like that Felicity gives a perfectly valid and reasonable answer that, like, no, I don't want to be part of this. She is understandably and genuinely afraid of what kind of trouble this could get her into. I mean, she knows that something bad has happened to Walter, and Felicity, being a good person, wants to help him. And she does even say, quite simply, it's because Walter was nice to her. And now some people might think of that as being a somewhat shallow motivation, but let's keep in mind, at her heart, Felicity, as we've seen, is a good person. And people generally tend to remember and want to help people who have been kind to them. And again, we have seen Walter going out there and demonstrating that he is willing to go out there and do the moral thing. He's willing to take these risks on himself. And when he does involve Felicity, he makes it very clear to her just what risks she's taking if she agrees to help him. And again, there, Felicity, being the good person, does so. So a part of it, of course, is wanting to desire to help Walter, but you can also sort of wonder if maybe the desire to just sort of wrap up what she had already gotten herself into, to really understand just the full situation of what's going on. I mean, she is already undeniably involved in this situation. She got the book from Walter, she gave the book to Oliver, and even before Oliver turned up in her car, Felicity was a player in this whole situation. So it's not that unreasonable to think that she would want resolution. Now, going back to the very beginning, when we see Oliver in the office after the great liner about how his mother has failed the city. And it is very telling, and Oliver even points out that out of everybody he's confronted over this, Moira is the only one who literally even said a word about her kids, who begged for her life, which shows where Moira's heart is. I mean, even Frank Bertinelli didn't say anything about his daughter. I mean, granted, she had betrayed him, and he had tried to kill her, but still, this shows Oliver where his mother's heart is, and that whatever she might be in, whatever bad stuff is going on, that she is not a completely evil person, and that in her heart, Oliver sees that he and Thea still come first. So it's no wonder that Oliver lets his guard down, and ultimately he pays the price for that. If he had simply taken a slightly harder stance and simply said, okay, if you answer my questions, I'll spare you, well, he might have gotten what he wanted and not gotten hurt. But again, this is his own mother that he's terrorizing. So it would really be a poor testament to Oliver's character if he didn't fail to do that. He's not a machine, and his family is Oliver's both his strength and his biggest weakness. If you want to hurt Oliver, that's where you strike at him. But if you strike at Oliver there, that's the thing that will really get him motivated to hurt you. So it's a very classic parallel. Now let's see. Let's go back to Felicity for a moment. I did see one person online complaining, saying like the police would never accidentally destroy such an important piece of evidence as the blood sample from a vigilante. Okay, I'm not a cop, but from what I understand of forensic science, and honestly just sort of medical testing in general, the way they do these things is they don't write, vigilante's blood sample on the bag at the lab. They give it a lab number. I mean, that's all it is. It's a file. It's a piece of evidence with a number on it. And if Felicity just went in there and screwed with computers and said, destroy this file, well, then it's not entirely unreasonable to think that some person who's just doing their job is going to go out and do that. Because, well, let's face it, and this is the 21st century. How many people out there have jobs whose a key part of it is go and do what the message on the computer tells you to do? So I really see absolutely no problem with that. And I do like that they also talk a little bit about like how Oliver is going to explain his brand new scar. I don't think it's not going to be that bad if his family hasn't seen him with his shirt off since he got into what they chalked up to a car accident. Then again, considering how much time Steve Amell spends running around without a shirt off, well, that might not. They might have. I really can't remember seeing that happening on any episode, but yeah. And man, Steve Amell is one cut dude. I mean, I see that guy, like, he can do that whole Salmon thing, the ladder with the pipe. That's stuff he does in real life. And they ultimately incorporated it into the show just because it made him look badass. I mean, I look at this dude and I'm like, wow, I really need to get to the gym. Oh god, it's Jamie Bamber and Battlestar Galactica all over again. Damn you, Jamie Bamber. Damn you. Okay, so let's move on, and I'll try not to think about all the ice cream that I just ate a little while ago. I'm so weak-willed. Okay, so let's go back. I think we're finished up in the present. So let's go back to the island. Now, I did like the training scene with Slade at the very beginning. I thought that was some pretty cool stuff. Although I was a little disappointed that Slade didn't take a moment to, when he was showing Oliver why it was he was teaching him that stuff with the sticks, to basically kind of give him the wax on, wax off line, because that's exactly what Slade was doing. He was teaching Oliver an essential skill using something that does not look like the skill itself. You know, classic wax on, wax off. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm referring to a classic 80s film, The Karate Kid, where the martial arts master teaches the kid how to block punches and stuff by making him wax cars. I know they did a remake of this with like Will Smith's son and Jackie Chan, but I never saw that because well, it's called The Karate Kid, and Jackie Chan does not practice karate. So in my book, that's BS. So plus, you know, the '80s Karate Kid is a classic movie. So yeah. Anyway, we get some nice shout outs to the comic books here. We are told the name of Deathstroke's partner, and that's Billy Wintergreen, aka William Rudolph, or Rudolph Wintergreen. And he's another character from the comics, and basically he's what Alfred is to Batman, Wintergreen is to Deathstroke. And I mean, it's really very obvious. I mean, they're even both Alfred and Wintergreen in the comics are both former members of the British military. You know, very well decorated guys, very proper British gentlemen, dedicated to serving a somewhat violent dude with somewhat obsessive tendencies. Now here, of course, he's a younger Australian guy, but you know, either way, even in the comics, and being an older guy, Wintergreen was still a pretty badass dude, and here Billy Wintergreen is indeed a pretty badass fella. And it's interesting, just the day before I was poking around online, and there's an Arrow comic book series published by the folks at DC Comics, and one of the people behind it is Mark Guggenheim, who is one of the people behind the show. So everything that he writes for those comics is indeed reasonably, you can be reasonably assured is canon. And you even get to see in the preview that I found online, this particular issue's build is actually the origin of Deathstroke. You see Billy as a character, and part of that, what you see them, is them arriving on the island. So that actually adds a very interesting amount of depth to their relationship. And here, I mean, Billy doesn't even get a line because they probably would have had to pay an actor if he talked. So, but anyway, we also have Slade mention his son Joe. This is, of course, Joseph Wilson, best known as Jericho from the Teen Titans. Very popular character. Well, I don't know if he's really popular. He's let's just say his death. He's actually best remembered for his death in the comics. Let's put it that way. He's also best remembered for having an extremely ridiculous costume and being one of the few superheroes in history to rock a Jew-fro. But he is really a very well remembered character in Teen Titans fandom, and I'm a longtime fan of the Teen Titans in their various incarnations. So I definitely did get a big kick out of that. Now let me see here. Oh yeah, one thing that I did really get a kick out of was that they chose a quote from the Odyssey to be the password test, whatever the heck they want to call it. And I do like that they point out that this, and if you're not familiar with the story of the Odyssey, it was written over 2,000 years ago by the legendary Greek poet Homer, and it's a story of Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, trying to return home from the Trojan War, and he goes on this just insane adventure that lasts for 10 years, just him trying to get home, and the story is called the Odyssey. And Odysseus goes through some just absolutely crazy stuff. I mean, it is really it's really an awesome story. But so Oliver seeing a parallel between himself and Odysseus is actually quite fitting. What's really fitting is that if you know the story, you know that when Odysseus does eventually return to Ithaca after all this time, he finds out that his kingdom is very much not the way that it was when he left it. Things have really gotten bad, and he's going to have to use some trickery and some badassery to put things right, which he does. And if I remember the story correctly, the way ultimately Odysseus proves that it's really him, he's been gone for 10 years, his wife hasn't seen him in that time, his son was just a little kid, barely doesn't even really recognize him. The way he ultimately ends up proving that he is indeed who he says he is, he says, okay, go and get the king's bow, and I will string it. And the story with that is that, this was basically sort of some kind of, I forget exactly how it was made, but basically it amounted to nobody but the king could string the bow because it was just like this super awesome badass bow that nobody but the king could string properly. So Odysseus' son gets the bow, and Odysseus is able to string it, and thus proves he is indeed the true king of Ithaca, and happy ending. So the archery aspect of that, while not remarked upon, if you're familiar with the story, it really will leap out at you. So yeah, very cool stuff there. Now, not beyond that, not a huge amount to say about what's going on with Slade as a character. Honestly, I was a little bit surprised when he turned up at the end. Like I said, I come to this from reading the comics for a very long time, and Deathstroke is very much portrayed as a villain. He is a villain who does have some sense of honor, but he is very, very much not a hero. He's a guy who basically his big mission in life is trying to kill a bunch of teenagers. Now, Deathstroke is not a good dude. But here we do see him come back, blow his chance to be saved in order to save Oliver from his own, stupidity / sense of honor. So it kind of makes me wonder, where is Slade going? Are they going to take? I have no doubt that he's ultimately going to become a villain. I mean, he even basically spells out that he believes that everybody in the world is only out for themselves. So it's not too unreasonable to think that a person coming in from that perspective could very easily become a villain. So the question is, of course, how does he get from where we see him now, risking his life, throwing away his chance to escape just to save Oliver's sorry butt, to becoming a serious enemy? Well, there's obviously quite a bit of story left there. So I think that's definitely going to be something really, really worth seeing. Now, we finally get to find out what's going on with Yao Fei, and that is that Eddie Friars has, of course, his daughter prisoner. Now, I really enjoy Byron Mann, if I remember correctly, is the fellow's name. He's the gentleman who plays Yao Fei. The only problem with this guy is that he just looks way too young for a guy to have a daughter who is probably like somewhere around, looks like the age of being a college student. I mean, unless he had a kid when he was like 14, this really doesn't seem to jive with how old this guy looks. Now, granted, you could just simply say Yao Fei is older than he looks, and okay, that makes perfect sense, but still, it's just a little distracting. Let's put it that way. Now, he mentions that his daughter's name is Shadow. This is spelled Shado. No W. And Shadow is a character who comes from the Longbow Hunters, which is probably the most well-known Green Arrow story in history. It's one of those stories from back in the day that really took Green Arrow from his sort of goofy Robin Hood kind of roots and made him into a serious character. You can really see that some of the teeth that Arrow has in terms of their take on Oliver comes from the Longbow Hunters. And beyond that, I don't really want to say too much about Shadow. Suffice to say, she is someone who weighs heavily in the Green Arrow mythos. She's somebody important. So, yeah. I gotta say though, I did laugh a little bit at seeing the tattoo on her shoulder there. All I could think was, oh, the girl with the dragon tattoo. How timely. And incidentally, I actually read the novel The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo a couple of weeks ago. It's pretty good. So, let me see here. Yeah, that pretty much wraps up everything that I had for what's going on with the island. We do see that apparently Billy Wintergreen is dead, so what's going to happen there? I mean, let's not forget when we left. We see at the end of the first episode. During the first episode, we briefly see the Deathstroke mask stuck up on a pole with an arrow through the eye. So, still some very interesting stuff going to happen in that on that island. Now, behind the scenes, one thing that is going on, and I don't really consider this a spoiler, so I'm just going to tell you guys about it, that Emily Rickards, who of course plays Felicity Smock, is getting promoted to being a full-time member of the cast. It's been mentioned on Steve Amell's Twitter and various other places. And honestly, I don't really think there's anybody out there who buys that Felicity is just going to kind of go back to her normal job after what's happened this time around, despite what she says about at the end about sticking around only long enough to find Walter. I mean, come on. So, yeah, I am totally in favor of this. Felicity is one of those characters that you just get, I guess, get an enormous kick out of her every time she turns up. Now, whether or not they're going to be able to keep that level of charm with her if she's a regular, okay, that's going to be a little bit more challenging. As they say, less is more. But the folks who are writing Arrow, they've done a really good job with pretty much all the characters all around, particularly the female characters. And one thing, I was actually looking at the writing credits for these last couple episodes. I'm sorry, for the series. And one thing I noticed is that there's only been like 3 or 4 episodes of the entire run so far. Basically, only about a third of the show that was either not written by women, like there were 2 ladies who wrote the last episode, or was one of the writers was female. So there's really been only 3 or 4 episodes of this series so far. Granted, we're only on episode 14 that have not had a female writer on board. And I got to say, folks, that I think that it's been mentioned that in television that there just simply are not enough female writers out there, and that is certainly an entirely true criticism of modern television. And this undoubtedly is a factor in the at times less than stellar portrayal of female characters on TV. Not that there aren't great female characters on TV, and not that I think that you need to have a female writer around in order to write a good female character. Okay, history has shown us there are male writers who can write great female characters and female writers who can write great male characters. Okay, I'm just saying that I think that this is a contributing factor to why it is that this show has so many great female characters and such interesting female characters. So I really do have to give the show a tip of the hat for that. There are a lot of reasons why this show is good, but I completely lost my train of thought, and I think I was repeating myself unnecessarily. So I'm going to wrap this up here while I'm still able to form coherent sentences. So with that said, folks, as always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. I also want to take a moment to say that there is some majorly awesome stuff in store coming next episode from the previews that I've seen and the official description of the episode that's been released. And I gotta say, I think this is going to be another real winner. There's just so much cool stuff going on with this show. I love it. And with that, folks, take care and have a good one.